The rope had cut deep into her wrists, raw and bloodied, by the time Dax Calder rode into the canyon. But it wasn't the sound of her struggling that made him pull his horse up short. It was her height. Even bound to that old cottonwood, she stood taller than any soul he'd ever laid eyes on, her head nearly brushing branches no man could reach. Her traditional dress was torn, stained with dust and dried blood. Yet her dark eyes burned with a fierce, unbroken pride that hit him square in the chest in a way he didn't understand. 3 horses stood tied nearby, their riders nowhere in sight, though Dax could hear voices echoing faintly off the canyon walls ahead. Whoever had done this wasn't far, and they'd be back soon. He'd ridden alone long enough that other people's suffering should have meant nothing. That's how a man survived out here. But something about the way she stood, unbent, unbroken, made him swing down from the saddle, knife already in hand. "Easy now," he said quietly, crouching by the rope. "I'm not here to hurt you." Up close, she was even more striking, easily 7 feet tall, with a kind of beauty that didn't belong in a forgotten canyon, but in stories men told around fires. Their eyes met. And something shifted. Something real. Something that made his heart kick hard against his ribs. "Who did this to you?" he asked, slicing through the thick rope binding her wrists. She flexed her hands, bringing life back into them, watching him with sharp, measured eyes. "Men who will be back soon," she said, her voice steady, her English touched with a faint accent. "You should leave before they find you here. I'm not leaving without you." The words surprised him as much as they did her. Dax Calder didn't make promises, especially not to strangers, and sure as hell not to a woman who could look him dead in the eye without lifting her chin. But something about her made every instinct he'd built as a drifter feel suddenly useless. "My name is Sihara," she said, rolling her shoulders, testing her strength. "Then you're either real brave or real reckless," Dax replied. "Maybe both." The voices were getting closer now, louder, sharper. This wasn't going to stay simple. "Can you use this?" he asked, handing her his spare revolver. Sihara took it like it belonged in her hand, checking the cylinder with practiced ease. "My father taught me to shoot before I learned to read." The laughter echoing through the canyon told him all he needed to know. At least 3 men, maybe more, and they weren't trying to stay quiet. "We need to move," Dax muttered, scanning for a way out. "You ride?" She gave him a look, almost offended. Better than most men. Dax let out a low whistle, and his horse came trotting over, a powerful Missouri Mustang, 16 hands high and built like iron. But as Sihara stepped toward it, he realized something he hadn't thought through. She was too tall, even for a horse like Gravewind. Didn't matter. She solved it in one smooth motion, vaulting up behind the saddle with effortless grace that stole the breath right out of him. "Damn," he muttered, swinging up in front of her. "My people were riding horses long before yours crossed the ocean," she shot back, wrapping her arms around his waist as she urged Gravewind forward into the canyon. The contact hit him harder than it should have, not just the warmth of her, but how natural it felt, like she belonged there, like she always had. Behind them, angry shouts erupted as the men found the empty tree. Dax risked a glance back, 3 riders bursting from between the rocks, hard-faced men with the kind of eyes that enjoyed hurting others. "They're part of Varric Holt's crew," Sihara said, her voice tight. "They've been hunting me for 3 days." "Why?" Dax asked, steering Gravewind toward higher ground for an advantage. He didn't get an answer. A gunshot cracked through the canyon. The bullet slammed into rock just feet from them. Their pursuers were mounted now, closing fast. "Hold on," Dax said, feeling her grip tighten around him. What he did next would either get them out alive, or get them both killed. But when he looked back at her, those dark, unyielding eyes, something long buried inside him stirred awake. And there was no way in hell he was letting Varric Holt's men drag her back into whatever hell they'd pulled her from. The chase drove us into country that would have tested a mountain goat. Gravewind proved exactly why I'd paid 3 times his worth 3 years back. He climbed every slope and narrow ledge like he'd been born to it. Behind us, the men chasing us struggled on weaker mounts, their recklessness fueled more by arrogance than skill. "There," Sihara said, pointing ahead toward a jagged cluster of rock about half a mile out. "There are caves. We can lose them there." I didn't question her. Out here, her knowledge of the land was the only thing keeping us breathing. As we reached the rocks, she slipped down from Gravewind in one smooth, silent motion, despite her towering frame. "This way," she whispered, guiding us into a maze of stone where even sound seemed to vanish. The cave she chose barely let Gravewind squeeze through the entrance, but deeper inside it opened into a wide chamber, dark enough to hide us from any quick search. Once my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through cracks in the ceiling, I finally saw what those men had done to her. Her dress, traditional, once proud, was torn in several places, exposing bruises along her arms and a cut across her cheek that made my blood run hot. But more than the wounds, it was the way she still carried herself, upright, unbroken, that struck harder than any injury. "How long were you tied to that tree?" I asked. "Since dawn," she said, leaning back against the cave wall with a grace that didn't match her size. "They said they were waiting for someone. Maybe a buyer." That word hit me like ice in my veins. A buyer. I'd heard whispers about Varric Holt, not just robbery or killing, but something worse. Trafficking people, the kind of business that made even hardened outlaws sick to their stomach. "What did you see?" I asked. "Why are they after you?" She stayed quiet for a moment, weighing me, deciding how much I was worth trusting. Then she spoke. "3 nights ago, I was hunting elk in the high country. I came across their camp. I wasn't alone." Her voice tightened. "There were women, children, all tied up like animals. They saw me watching. I had to run." She swallowed, pain flashing across her face. "There were others, at least a dozen. Some white, some Mexican. Some from my own people, all young." She looked away. "All worth money to the right kind of buyer." The cave fell silent, save for our breathing and the faint echo of hooves somewhere out there in the canyon. They were still searching, but they hadn't found us. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "for what they did to you and what they're doing to the others." She looked at me then. Really looked, like she was trying to see past the dust, the scars, the man I'd been. "You're not like the men I've known," she said. "Why do you say that? Most men, my height makes them uneasy. They fear me, or they stare like I'm something strange." Her gaze softened just a little. "You look at me like I'm just a woman." "That's because you are," I said. "A strong one, a beautiful one, and you deserve better than being tied to a tree by men like Varric Holt." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or the first spark of something deeper. When she smiled, it changed everything, softened the edges, lit her from within, and in a quiet voice, almost to herself, she said, "I think you might be a good man, Dax Calder." "Don't trust me too much," I said. But for the first time in years, I found myself hoping she was right. We stayed hidden in that cave until the sounds of the chase faded into nothing. Still, it was clear Sihara was running on empty. 3 days on the run and a morning tied to a tree would wear down anyone, even someone as strong as her. "There's a town about 10 miles east," I told her. "Cartwright, we could get you a room, some food, maybe talk to the territorial law." She shook her head right away. "Varric Holt owns the law in Cartwright. Half the town council, too. Going there would be walking into a trap." "Then where?" "There's another place. Willow Run, about 15 miles north. Small, but honest folk. My cousin lives there. She married a rancher 5 years ago. As we prepared to leave the cave, I caught myself watching her. How she moved. How natural it all looked, even with her height. Everything about her challenged things I'd never thought to question." "Sihara," I said as we reached the entrance. "Why do you trust me? I could be working for Holt." She rested a hand on Gravewind's neck and looked at me like she could see straight through my bones. "Because when you cut those ropes," she said quietly, "your hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger at what they'd done to me." She was right. Men who sell people don't get angry over suffering. I hadn't even realized she'd noticed. But seeing her tied up like that had stirred something in me I thought was long dead. And it wasn't just that. It was the way she looked at me. No fear, no suspicion. None of that usual mix I'd grown used to seeing in people's eyes. "There's something else you should know," I said once we were riding again. "About me." "What is it?" "I'm not just some drifting cowboy. There was a time I made my living with these guns, not always on the right side of the law." She stayed quiet for a moment, letting it sink in. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm trying to be different, someone better." "That's good," she said softly, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Because the man I saw today, Dax Calder, he's exactly the man I hoped to find." As we rode toward Willow Run, my mind drifted to everything I'd spent years avoiding. What it might mean to stop running, to build something real, with someone. For the first time since I was old enough to carry a gun, the future felt like something worth thinking about. But first, we had to survive long enough to reach it. The ride to Willow Run took us through some of the finest country I'd ever seen. Rolling hills painted with wildflowers, cold, clear streams cutting through the land, mountains rising like cathedral walls beneath an endless sky. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. "Holt has more men than just those 3, Sihara said, as if she'd read my thoughts. "His network stretches across 3 territories. Someone's probably already riding ahead to cut us off." "How do you know so much about his operation?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. I could feel the tension in her as she leaned against me. "Because my brother worked for him," she said at last, "before he understood what Holt really was." My grip tightened slightly on the reins. "What happened to him?" "Varric Holt killed him when he tried to leave," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "Made it look like an accident. But I knew the truth." Her arms tightened around me. "That's why I was watching his camp," she continued. "I was looking for proof of what really happened." And just like that, everything fell into place. This wasn't just about her seeing something she shouldn't have. This was personal. Varric Holt had torn her family apart, and Sihara had been gathering proof ever since, waiting for the right moment to bring him down. "We're going to stop him," I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. "You really think I'm going to let you face him alone after what he did?" I felt her arms tighten around me, and when she spoke, there was something raw in her voice. "You barely know me, Dax. Why would you risk your life for my fight?" It was a fair question, and the truth was, I didn't have a clean answer. How could I explain that something inside me had shifted the moment I saw her tied to that tree? That for the first time in years, I'd found something worth fighting for. Something more than just staying alive? Maybe because it ain't just your fight anymore, I said. We crested a ridge then, and Willow Run stretched out below us. A small settlement built around a natural spring, maybe 20 buildings in all, with a well-kept corral full of cattle. Smoke curled from chimneys, and folks moved about their business like any quiet frontier town. There, Sihara said, pointing toward a house on the edge of town, larger than the rest, well-built. That's where my cousin Mirelle lives, with her husband. As we rode down, people started to notice us. They paused, watching, not hostile, just curious. Hard not to be, with Sihara's height. You could spot her from a mile out. Seems like decent folk, I muttered. Mirelle married well, she replied. Her husband Garrick is respected here. That respect protects those close to him, too. We were just pulling up to the house when the door swung open, and a woman hurried out. She was tall, though not like Sihara, and dressed in a mix of traditional and settler clothes. The moment she saw Sihara, her face lit up. Sihara, she called, rushing forward. Thank the spirits you're alive. We heard about the attack on your village, when you didn't come back. They embraced tightly, speaking fast in a language I didn't understand. But I didn't need the words to see the bond between them, or the way Mirelle's expression darkened as Sihara told her what had happened. Varric Holt. Mirelle spat the name like poison. That devil's been a curse on this land for far too long. A new voice cut in then, deep, steady, carrying the slow drawl of Texas. Someone say Varric Holt? I turned to see a man walking up from the barn, tall, lean, with a face weathered by sun and years of hard work. No doubt about it. That was Garrick Vane. Garrick, Mirelle said, this is my cousin Sihara, and her friend Dax Calder. They've had trouble with Holt's men. Garrick's expression hardened as Sihara told her story again. When she finished, he stood there quiet for a long moment, studying us both. Holt's been getting bolder lately, he said at last. Word is, he's planning something big. One last score before he rides south and lives like a king. What kind of score? I asked. No one knows for sure, Garrick said, but there's talk of a caravan passing through next week. Families heading west to California, hauling everything they own. Sihara and I exchanged a glance. A caravan full of families. That was exactly the kind of target Varric Holt preyed on. Vulnerable people, carrying everything, with no real way to defend themselves. We have to warn them, Sihara said. We stop him, I corrected. Garrick looked between us, then gave a slow nod. Then you'd better come inside, he said. Let's sit down and figure out how the hell we're going to do it. Inside Garrick's house, the four of us gathered around a heavy wooden table while Mirelle set out coffee and fresh bread. Maps were spread across the surface, marked with the main routes heading west. The Ash Trail caravan will pass through the canyon in 6 days, Garrick said, pointing to a narrow stretch on the map. 47 wagons, maybe 200 souls, mostly families, carrying everything they've got. A perfect target for Varric Holt, I muttered. That pass is ideal for an ambush, Sihara added, studying the terrain. One way in, one way out, high walls on both sides. If Holt places his men right, that caravan won't stand a chance, Sihara said. Garrick Vane gave a slow nod. That's exactly what worries me. But here's the problem. The pass is the only way through those mountains. Every other trail's too rough for loaded wagons. We can't reroute them. Then we make damn sure Holt isn't there waiting, I said. Mirelle Voss, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "How many men does he have?" "Last I heard, around 25, Garrick replied. "All killers, not odds any sane man would take on." I glanced at Sihara. The fire in her dark eyes told me she was thinking the same thing I was. Sensible odds had never stopped either of us from doing what was right. "What if we turned some of Holt's own men against him?" Sihara said suddenly. Garrick raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly would you pull that off?" "My brother told me things before he died," she said. "Holt rules through fear, but he also pays well. If we can convince a few of his men they'd earn more by betraying him than staying loyal." It was dangerous. Real dangerous. But it made sense. Outlaws weren't known for loyalty when there was better money on the table. "That means getting close to his operation," I said. "Close enough to talk to his men without getting shot on sight." "I know where his main camp is," Sihara said quietly. "And I know someone who can help us." All eyes turned to her. "There's a man named Rook Vatcher," she continued. "He used to ride with Holt, left about 6 months ago. Said he was done with all the killing. Now he's hiding out in a cabin about 20 miles from here, trying to live straight." "You think he'd help us?" Garrick asked. "I think he'd help me," Sihara said. "He was close to my brother. He owes him." The plan we built over the next 2 hours was either brilliant or suicidal. Maybe both. Rook Vatcher would be our way in, our only way in. But first, we had to convince him to walk away from the quiet life he'd carved out for himself. "I'll ride out to him tomorrow," I said. "See if I can bring him in." "We'll go," Sihara corrected. "Rook knew my brother better than anyone. If we're going to convince him, I need to be there." Garrick frowned. "That's a lot of risk for both of you." "If Holt's got men watching him," I said, "we'll deal with them." And I meant it. Something had changed in me since I met Sihara. The cold, calculating gunman I used to be was giving way to something else. Something warmer, but far more dangerous. A man with something to protect. As the night wore on, and we sharpened the details of the plan, I couldn't help but notice how Sihara filled the room. Not just because of her height, but because of the quiet strength she carried. Garrick and Morel respected her, and I understood why. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. She was commanding. "Dax," she said later, as we were getting ready to turn in. "Can I speak with you? Alone?" We stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets. Above us, the stars burned bright against a velvet sky. "You sure about this?" she asked. "Helping me go after Holt. You could walk away, start fresh somewhere else." I turned to her, once again struck by how she could meet my eyes without ever needing to look up. In the moonlight, she looked like something out of legend. Beautiful, fierce, impossible to turn away from. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Not without you." "Dax, we've only known each other a day." "I know," I cut in gently. "It's crazy, but I've spent most of my life running from things, and I'm tired of it." I took a slow breath. For the first time, I've found something worth staying for. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the starlight reflected in her dark eyes. "And what is that?" she asked. "You," I answered, plain and simple. She kissed me then, soft at first, unsure, then deeper as I pulled her close. She was strong, warm, and felt like she belonged right there in my arms. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what waited for us ahead, no matter what we faced with Varric Holt, I wasn't going to let anything happen to her. "I've never felt this way about anyone," she whispered against my lips. "Neither have I," I said, "and I'm not about to lose it now. The ride to Rook Vatcher's cabin took us through rough country, the kind that kept most folks away and gave a man 100 places to disappear if he needed to. Exactly the kind of ground someone like him would choose to vanish into. "There," Sihara said, pointing toward a thin trail of smoke rising behind a stand of pines. "That's got to be his place." We moved in, slow, careful. A man living like that didn't take kindly to surprises. Just like we expected. We hadn't closed half the distance when a voice cut through the trees. "That's far enough. State your business." "Sihara," she called back, steady and clear. "Sister of Cairo." There was a long pause. Then the sound of boots moving through brush. The man who stepped out looked about my age. Lean, sharp-eyed, the kind who stayed alive by thinking fast and shooting faster. When he saw her, something in his face shifted. Recognition, and something close to regret. "Damn, Sihara," he said quietly. "I heard about Cairo. Wish I'd been there." "You couldn't have stopped it," she replied, "but you can help make sure it doesn't happen again." His eyes slid to me, measuring. "And who's your friend?" "Dax Calder," I said, stepping down from the saddle, keeping my hands where he could see them, well clear of my guns. His eyes narrowed just a touch. "Dax Calder, the one who took down the Jameson crew alone?" "That was a long time ago," I said. "I'm trying to be someone else now." "Someone like what?" "The kind of man who stops men like Holt before they ruin more lives." Rook didn't answer right away. He just stood there, studying both of us. Then finally, he jerked his head toward the cabin. "All right," he said. "Come on, let's talk." The cabin was small, but it had the feel of a place someone had worked hard to make into a home. Books lined a shelf, a guitar rested in the corner, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the back. "I've been out of that life 6 months, Rook said, pouring coffee into tin cups. "Got a little garden, a few chickens, nobody shooting at me. Ain't much, but it's honest." "Sihara's brother tried to walk away too," I said quietly. "Holt killed him for it." Rook's hand tightened around his cup. "How long you think before he decides you know too much to let live?" Sihara added. Silence hung in the room. "What exactly are you asking of me?" he said at last. "Help us get inside Holt's operation," I said. "We need to know his plans for the Ash Trail caravan and turn some of his men against him." Rook let out a dry breath. "You're talking about suicide. Holt doesn't trust anyone, especially not someone who walked away. He'd kill me the second he saw me." "Not if you bring him something he wants," Sihara said. Rook frowned. "Like what?" She and I exchanged a glance. We'd thought about it on the ride out here, but saying it out loud made it real. "Me," she said. Rook nearly choked on his coffee. "You out of your mind? You want me to hand you over to Holt?" "Not exactly," Sihara said calmly. "Just enough to make him believe you captured me. That gets you close to him. Close enough to gather information. Maybe even pull some of his men to our side." "And then what?" Rook shot back. "How do you plan on getting out alive?" "That's where I come in," I said. "While you're inside, I'll be positioned close enough to cover you when things go bad." "When doesn't it?" Rook Vatcher muttered dryly. "Not with Holt in the picture," I answered. Rook went quiet after that, staring out the window at the peaceful valley he'd been trying to call home. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight to it. "Cairo saved my life twice when we rode with Holt," he said. "I owe him, and I owe his sister seeing Holt pay for what he did." Sihara stepped forward. "So, will you help us?" Rook nodded once. "I'll help, but we do it my way, my plan." He leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp again. Holt's smart, suspicious. If we're gonna fool him, we've gotta be smarter. What do you have in mind? I asked. A hard smile crept across his face. Holt's got a weakness, revenge. If he thinks I'm bringing him Cairo's sister to settle a score, he won't kill her right away. He'll want to savor it. Show it off. He paused. That buys us time. It was a solid plan, but it meant putting Sihara right in the middle of Holt's camp. Every instinct I had pushed against it. There's got to be another way, I said. There isn't, Sihara replied, her voice firm as iron. This is our best chance to save those families and make Holt pay for what he did to my brother. I looked at her and saw that same unbreakable resolve that had carried her this far. She wasn't backing down. And deep down, I knew she was right. All right, I said at last. But we do this smart, careful. First sign something goes wrong, we pull out. Agreed, she said. Rook gave a short nod. Then we start planning. If this is going to work, we need to think through every way it can fall apart. The next 2 days were nothing but planning. Rook knew Holt's operation better than anyone, and he walked us through every detail, how the camp was laid out, their routines, the personalities of Holt's top men. Holt's main camp sits in Dead Horse Canyon, Rook said, sketching out a rough map on a piece of paper. About 30 men total, but they're not all there at once. Half of them are usually out on jobs or scouting. What about guards? I asked. 3 posted at all times, Rook answered. 1 at the canyon entrance, 2 up high watching the ridges. They're looking for lawmen or rival outfits. He glanced at us. Not for someone riding in with a gift for Varric Holt. So how do we play it? Sihara asked. Rook didn't hesitate. I ride in with you tied behind my saddle, he said. Tell Holt I found you hiding near your brother's old cabin, that I figured he'd want to deal with you himself. He tapped the map. While I get close to him, learn what I can about the caravan plan. You keep him distracted. Give him a story he wants to hear. I didn't like any part of it, but it was the best shot we had. What about me? I asked. You take the high ground? Rook said. Set up in the rocks overlooking the camp, close enough to cover us if things go bad, but far enough the lookouts don't spot you. How do we stay in touch? I asked. We don't, Rook Vatcher said plainly. Once Sihara and I ride into that camp, we're on our own, until we can signal you. The plan had 100 ways to fall apart. But it was the only shot we had to get the information needed to stop Varric Holt's ambush on the Ash Trail caravan. That night, while we finished preparing, Sihara and I found ourselves alone again on Garrick's porch. The sky was thick with stars, and the night air carried the scent of wild flowers and open earth. You afraid? I asked. I am, she admitted. But not of Holt. I'm afraid of what might happen to you if this goes wrong. Nothing's gonna happen to me, I said, taking her hand. And not to you either. I won't allow it. She squeezed my fingers gently. Dax, there's something I need to tell you about my brother and Varric Holt. What is it? Cairo wasn't just working for him, she said quietly. He was his right hand for nearly 2 years. He knew everything, where every body was buried, literally and otherwise. The weight of that hit hard. When he tried to leave, she went on. Holt didn't just kill him to keep him quiet. He tortured him, trying to find out if he'd told anyone what he knew. My jaw tightened. Holt thinks you know what Cairo knew, I said. She nodded. That's why they've been hunting me so hard. It's not just revenge. It's about protecting his secrets. That changed everything. This plan just got a whole lot more dangerous, I said. If Holt suspects, even for a second, you're lying to him. He'll kill me slow, she finished. I know, she added softly. But those secrets, they're the key to bringing all of it down. If I can get to his records, his plans, his contacts, we could end it. Not just the caravan ambush, everything. Her voice steadied. The kidnappings, the killings, the corruption. We could stop it for good. Standing there under the stars, looking at her, brave, unshaken, I felt something shift deep inside me. This wasn't just about saving a caravan anymore. This was justice. For Cairo. For every soul Holt had broken. For the life we were trying to build together. All right, I said. We do it. But promise me something. What? If things go sideways, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Get out alive. And leave Holt to me. She smiled, fierce and unyielding. I promise to be careful, she said. But I won't promise to run if you're in danger. We're partners now, Dax Calder. Partners don't leave each other behind. When she kissed me that time, it felt like a promise and a goodbye. At dawn, we would ride straight into the heart of darkness to face one of the most dangerous men in the territory. But that night, we still had each other. And that was enough. The morning we rode out for Dead Horse Canyon came cold and clear, the kind of air that made every detail of the land stand sharp. Rook had done his work well. The setup looked real. Sihara's hands were bound with rope that appeared tight, but could be slipped free if needed. Her dress had been torn just enough to sell the story. Remember, Rook said as we neared the canyon, you have to look defiant, but beaten. Angry, but not foolish. Holt needs to believe he's broken you enough to control you, while still enjoying the fight. I understand, Sihara said. There was steel in her voice, enough to make me believe she could pull it off. I split off from their path about 2 miles from the canyon entrance, taking a longer, quieter route that led me to higher ground overlooking Holt's camp. I moved carefully, avoiding the lookouts Rook had warned about, until I found a narrow perch among the rocks. From there, I could see everything. Through the binoculars, I studied the camp spread out below. Rough shelters and makeshift lean-tos circled a natural spring. Horses were penned in a crude corral, and I counted at least 20 men moving between tents. Varric Holt was easy to pick out. Big man, graying hair, the kind of presence you could feel even at a distance. He stood near what looked like the main tent, talking with 2 others like he owned the ground beneath his boots. Then Rook Vatcher rode in, with Sihara tied behind his saddle. Even from where I was perched, I could see the ripple it caused. Men stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Holt's attention snapped toward them instantly. I couldn't hear a word, but I didn't need to. Holt was pleased. Too pleased. And Rook, he played it perfectly. Pointing, talking, gesturing like he was explaining exactly how he'd caught her, like he was handing over a prize. For the next hour, I watched as Holt questioned Sihara while his men gathered around. This wasn't just curiosity. This was a show, something important to their leader. Through the glass, I saw her hold steady, tall, controlled, proud. She gave him just enough, but never more than she had to. Then Holt gave an order. 2 men stepped forward and took her away toward one of the larger shelters. Cold hit my chest like a blade. They were separating her from Rook, cutting off any chance of coordination. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. For the next few hours, Sihara would be alone, right in the heart of Holt's operation. No backup, no signal, no way out if things turned bad. All I could do was watch and wait, trusting that the woman I was falling for was as strong and as sharp as I believed. But as the afternoon dragged on, and shadows stretched across the canyon floor, something started to feel wrong. Holt paced back and forth, arguing with his lieutenants, pointing again and again toward the shelter where they'd taken Sihara. Whatever she'd told him, or refused to tell him, it was rattling him. Bad. And then I saw it, the moment everything changed. Holt started barking orders. His men began gathering weapons, supplies, but they weren't getting ready for an ambush. They were packing to move. Now, and they were taking Sihara with them. The plan didn't just go bad, it went catastrophic. I had to make a choice, and fast. Stick to the plan. Wait for Rook to signal when he had what we needed, or break cover, create a distraction, give them a chance to get out alive. Through the binoculars, I saw the urgency in every movement. They'd be riding out in less than an hour. Whatever had spooked Holt, it was big enough to make him abandon his own camp. Then I spotted Rook near the horse corral. Even from that distance, I could see it in him. The tension, the way he tried to look calm, but kept glancing toward the shelter where Sihara was held. Something had gone wrong. Real wrong. I was still weighing my options when the decision got made for me. One of Holt's men, a thin, dangerous-looking bastard I'd seen earlier, walked up to Rook, his hand resting on his gun. I didn't hear a word. Didn't need to. Rook's cover was blown. Holt had figured it out. Rook wasn't there for revenge. He wasn't delivering Cairo's sister, and that meant, in a matter of minutes, both Rook Vatcher and Sihara would be dead. I'd been behind a rifle long enough to know when quiet had to give way to action. Sometimes the best plan was the simplest one. Start shooting, and don't stop until the bad men are down or running. I checked my weapons one last time. 2 Colt 45s, both cylinders full. A Winchester rifle, loaded and ready, with enough rounds for a small war. It would have to be enough. My first shot dropped the lookout posted high on the canyon ridge, silent, clean, before he could raise the alarm. The second shot was for the man standing over Rook Vatcher. It spun him around and slammed him face first into the dirt of the corral. After that, hell broke loose. The Holt syndicate scattered like startled quail. Some dove behind wagons and crates, others scrambled for their guns. I'd caught them off guard, and it took them a few precious seconds to figure out where the fire was coming from. I used every second. The rifle bucked against my shoulder as I poured shots into the camp, picking off anyone trying to rally the others. Years as a hired gun had taught me one thing: shoot fast, shoot true, and don't hesitate. Those lessons were keeping me alive. In the middle of the chaos, I saw Rook break free and sprint toward the shelter where they were holding Sihara. Down below, Varric Holt was shouting orders, trying to pull his men together, but the surprise had already torn his camp apart. Then I saw her. Sihara burst out of the shelter, no longer bound, gun in hand. Even in the middle of the gunfight, something hit me hard. Relief and pride. She wasn't just alive. She was fighting. But Holt saw her too, and he moved fast, cutting her off with what men he had left. I shifted my fire, covering her path, trying to keep the distance clear, but I was running low on ammunition, and there were still too many of them between her and freedom. And then, she did something I'll never forget. Instead of diving for cover, she turned and charged straight at Holt. A war cry tore from her throat, echoing through the canyon like something out of an old legend. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Even the gunfire seemed to fade. Every man there, outlaws included, stared at the towering Apache woman, nearly 7 feet tall, storming toward their leader like an avenging spirit. Holt barely had time to draw. She was already on him. The impact was like watching a force of nature collide with everything rotten in this world. She was taller, faster, driven by grief and fury. He was hardened, vicious, fighting to survive. They crashed together, locked in a brutal tangle. Holt's weapons flew from his hands, lost in the dust as Sihara drove him to the ground. From my position on the ridge, I could see them struggling, but I didn't have a clean shot without risking her. Down below, Rook had reached the horses, fighting to carve a way out. But Holt's remaining men were regrouping now, returning fire in tighter, more controlled bursts. The high ground gave me an edge, but I was still outnumbered. And then I heard it. The sound that changed everything. Hoofbeats, loud, fast, echoing off the canyon walls. At first I thought it was more of Holt's men riding in. Then I saw them crest the ridge. Garrick Vane, riding hard, with a dozen men from the Dustvale folk behind him, armed and charging straight into the fight. Morel must have convinced him we needed help. And he answered. The moment they hit the canyon floor, the tide turned. Holt's men, already shaken, broke under the pressure. Some ran for their horses, others fled on foot, disappearing into the rocks. But Holt, he was still fighting Sihara, and the fight was turning desperate. He was bigger, stronger, and he'd managed to pin her down, one hand already reaching for the knife at his belt. I didn't have a clean shot. Didn't matter. I fired anyway. The bullet tore into Varric Holt's shoulder, snapping him sideways and breaking his grip on Sihara just long enough for her to break free. She hit the ground, rolled, and came up in one smooth motion I'd already learned to admire. Blood stained her dress, but her eyes, they burned. Holt was hurt, but not finished. He lunged again, knife in his good hand, his face twisted with rage and pain. Sihara was ready. She slipped the strike, drove her knee hard into his gut, folding him just enough. And what came next was fast. Final. She tore the knife from his hand with a move clean enough to impress any soldier alive. And when she rose to her full height, Varric Holt was no longer a threat to anyone. The fight was over. The Holt syndicate scattered like dust on the wind. Their leader lay dead, and the danger to the Ash Trail caravan was gone. As I made my way down from the canyon ridge to join the others, something settled deep inside me. We hadn't just stopped an ambush. We'd proven something. That ordinary people, when they stand together, can face down evil. That justice doesn't always come from badges or courts. Sometimes, it comes from those who refuse to let cruelty go unanswered. And maybe more than that, we proved something else too, that even in the harshest corners of the frontier, something like love can still take root. By the time I reached the canyon floor, Sihara broke from the group and ran straight toward me. When she wrapped her arms around me and lifted me clean off the ground, laughing through everything we'd just survived, I knew. My life as a drifting gunman was over. I'd found something worth staying for. 3 months later, I stood beside Sihara in the small church of Willow Run, listening as Benedict Roran pronounced us husband and wife. She wore a dress Morel had sewn just for her, a beautiful blend of Apache tradition and settler style, everything I'd come to love about her in one piece. When the pastor said I could kiss my wife, I had to stretch just to reach her. The whole church broke into laughter and applause. And for the first time in a long while, everything we'd risked felt worth it. Garrick Vane offered me work running his ranch, and I took it without a second thought. It felt good, building something instead of tearing it down. Putting roots into the ground didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt like home. Rook Vatcher stayed too, working as Garrick's foreman, slowly building the quiet life he'd once thought was out of reach. The three of us became close, bound by danger, by trust, and by the knowledge that we'd done something that mattered. The Ash Trail caravan crossed the pass without trouble and made it all the way to California. The Ash Trail family sent a letter from their new home, thanking us for the lives and freedom they still had. It was the kind of letter that reminds a man his time in this world meant something. As for Holt's operation, the Iron Veil deputies, armed with the information we gathered, rounded up what was left and tore the whole network apart. The kidnappings, the trafficking, the years of suffering that had scarred this land. They were finally over. "Do you ever regret it?" Sihara asked one evening as we sat out on the porch of our new home, watching the sunset spill gold and crimson across the mountains. "Leaving the life you had for this?" I pulled her closer, still amazed, every single day, at how perfectly she fit in my arms, despite the difference in our size. "The only thing I regret," I said quietly, "is all the years I wasted before I found you." She smiled. That same strong, breathtaking smile that had caught hold of me the first time I saw her, tied to that tree in the canyon, unbroken. "My people have a saying," she said softly. "The heart recognizes its home long before the mind understands the path." What does that mean? It means some people are meant to find each other, no matter how long or how strange the road between them is. As the first stars began to rise in the darkening sky, I thought about everything that had brought us here. A hardened drifter, and a woman who stood taller than anyone else in the world, set apart by fate, by strength, brought together by violence, and bound by something far stronger. "I love you, Sihara Calder," I said, speaking her name as mine for the first time. "I love you too, Dax," she answered. "Always will." When we kissed beneath the open sky, it felt like something more than a moment. It felt like a promise, the kind that lasts a lifetime. We had found our home in each other, and nothing in this world, or any other, was ever going to take that away. Behind us, through the open door, came the sound of laughter and music as friends and neighbors carried on the celebration. But out there, beneath the endless Montana sky, it was just the two of us, and the future we were building together.